I'm a geographer and spatial planner or city urban planner based in Vienna. And yeah, I work for Kreative Räume Wien, which means Creative Spaces Vienna. And I hope to give you some input for like a possibility how to tackle the issue of vacancy in your city in like a structured way. We're basically an agency, you could say, for vacancy activation and interim use. We really emphasize actually the idea of vacancy activation, but like in practice, often it's like temporary projects or interim use that is realized. So I don't know, both words are kind of like official in our title or in the description what we do. So as a start, I guess it's important to understand Vienna, of course, it's quite unique actually compared to other cities too. That was really huge early on in 1910. It was like considered one of the biggest cities in the Western world with around like 2.2 million inhabitants. And then it kind of took a decline starting with the end of First World War because it lost like the importance of being the capital of a huge empire kind of, and this was like further amplified later when the Iron Curtain went up after the Second World War. That was kind of at the edge of the Western world and cut off in 3 or 4 directions kind of. Just towards the west there was still like a connection for trade and business and everything. So on the one hand side, it's like the city really has a lot of old buildings when you compare it to other cities in the West, like stretching from the inner city to the edges. And that's quite unique. And also it's still like not so much was destroyed when you compare it to other cities like in Hamburg or Berlin in Germany. The city structure is comparatively quite intact. And then the population went down to lower than 1.5 million in the end of the 1980s. That was like the lowest point. And then the kind of reurbanization process started. And now it's a growing city, gaining population all the time, up to 1.9 million now. It's a growing city, taking shape in like an old structure. And at the same time, you should not forget that, of course, today, people have a lot more living space than they used to have 100 years ago, so new buildings are needed all the time. And then when you compare it to other cities in Western Europe, actually was always an administrative city and had a relatively low degree of industrialization. So in many Western cities, it's common that you have areas quite large that have been deindustrialized. The kind of vacant spaces you often deal with. I'm sure you have some of this in Vienna, but compared to other cities, it's not a huge factor. Like the industrialization was never really characteristic for the city so much. So still, of course, we do have vacancy, definitely. And like the most relevant types of vacancy are this kind of ground floor level shops. Those are mostly like you have a lot of, it has to do with the old structure of the city too. You have quite a lot of shopping streets all over the city. And of course, like in the city center, there's no problem. In the attractive areas, there small shops and everything is quite functioning quite well. But when you go to the periphery, this kind of oldest shopping streets, they sometimes are in a little bit of trouble. It has to do with like on the one hand side, all kind of shopping centers in the city center, but also some on the edges of the city. And in recent years, definitely the whole online shopping thing contributes also to more shops being not in use anymore. And then you have this kind of like city districts, you could say they have been gentrified in recent years, and there it's quite easy to find new users, like for example, some architecture offices or whatever, like some professions like to activate this kind of spaces, but still definitely ground floor shops are in some areas kind of a concern. And it's also what has to be said, this kind of shops, it's a really visible kind of vacancy, like different from some office building or whatever. You see it right away. When you walk down the street, you realize that there's something empty and has maybe kind of like not the best image to it, or the atmosphere is influenced by it. So we actually get confronted quite a lot by people interested in activating space. Oh, what's going on with those ground floor shops? And at the same time, you have to say that often actually they are not really even empty. They're more, sometimes they look empty and are just used for storage or whatever, but they're actually really rented. And quite a few reasons also that sometimes don't make it so easy to activate this kind of spaces, because often, for example, the landlord has like an expectation of rent that is maybe too high for the area, and for him it's not worth the hassle to him or her not worth to like put so much effort in renting something out that he will benefit not so much from financially. So at the same time, definitely we have offices in the city. There's actually a quite high percentages of offices that are empty. And those definitely are a lot less visible. Like you don't really realize how much there is. It's estimated somewhere around like 15% that offices are not in use, and those are actually really hard to get to or to try to do something with, because like often they are part of the portfolio of some kind of real estate firm, and they're often not so interested in like activating these spaces for a low price. So they like prefer to just leave it in their portfolio and not make a big thing about it being empty. Then we definitely do have some of what's called conversion areas, like for example, former railway stations for like freight and this kind of stuff. We do have some in the city, and quite often those are actually used nowadays for realizing city extension projects. That's really like, there's actually areas that are really interesting to us, because you always have like also this phase from like it falls out of use, and then in the end there's going to be like a new part of the city but it takes a long time, and in between definitely there is a time to try to make use of the empty building there, and maybe also like have a benefit for the kind of quarter that's going to exist there in the end. And then, of course, like another issue is, or another chance from our view rather, is public buildings out of use. So, for example, in Vienna recently, there have been like a few hospitals that came out of use because a new big hospital was built, so a few small ones closed. And recently we've been concerned with this kind of empty hospital buildings a bit, and you've got like sometimes empty schools or whatever, and that's definitely an important kind of empty building for us. Unfortunately, that there are no official numbers whatsoever, like neither for private buildings nor for public buildings. Like there's, I don't know, some estimations, but it's not like officially counted. Like even us, also we're like kind of the experts for the field. We also don't have the time resources to do like a survey for a city with 1.9 million inhabitants. We don't really know. So it's more like tacit knowledge to know what's going on, but there's no official number. Maybe apart from some few areas in the city, it's not that we see vacancy as a huge issue in Vienna. It's not like that it's you walk around the city and feel like, okay, everything is empty and it's a huge issue. It's more, we see vacancy as a resource and as a chance to find spaces for users that otherwise have like a difficult time to be realized in the city, mostly due to financial reasons. Kreative Räume was only founded in 2016. But there have been like efforts made to tackle the issue of vacancy, or to try to have this kind of temporary projects going on since quite a while. The first like big, huge project that was really important in Vienna was since 1998, the project Einfach Mehrfach, which means kind of like Einfach is like once or one time, and Mehrfach is like several times. And it was originally mostly about opening up spaces that are used only temporarily, like, for example, schoolyards and this kind of stuff, that are not in use on the weekend, that are not in use during vacation time, to make that available for use during that time. And it quite quickly actually developed to more like opening up temporary spaces for also cultural projects and all this kind of stuff, or even nightclubs and all of this. And there was especially one person, like the head of the project, and she's called Jutta Kledorfer, and she has since then also, she's retired by now, and still she's a really important person in Vienna as kind of an agent for the subject. She knows everybody, and yeah, she did realize a lot of projects. And the thing is that, like, her as a person, you could never criticize. She's great, but it really depended a lot on her as a person. So there was not too much of like a structure around it. Like if you take her out of the project, I don't know, not too much is left. So that's kind of why in the following years, like everybody was seeing like the benefits of this kind of projects, but the idea came up, yeah, we like maybe some more like established kind of agency could, yeah, handle the subject in the long term. And in 2010, it was like the first time, like really officially mentioned, as far as I know, at least, in the coalition agreement of SPÖ, which is like the Social Democrat Party and the Green Party. Before the Social Democrat Party had been ruling alone for quite a while, and then they needed to do a coalition, and the Green Party brought the idea of an agency with this kind of vacancy use into the coalition paper, and since then it was like on kind of like a little bit the political agenda. Then in the following years, there were quite a few studies done, cultural scene, you could say, or like the free art scene, of which IG Kultur is like the interest group for this kind of free artists in Vienna, and they were really pushing the subject and worked together with the technical university. And like the third part of the study they did was actually then even collaboration with MA18, which is like the city administration department for urban planning. Then in 2014 was an important study, which was of Departure, which is like the creative industries branch of our economics agency of the city of Vienna. It was called Räume Kreative Nutzung, which means like spaces of creative use, and it really emphasized the need, or also the importance of this kind of what they called hybrid spaces in the city, where you like reuse old buildings and combine all kind of different actors in places with a high potential for the development of yeah, future economic activity and cultural activity and so on. Then in 2015, finally, there was like, so 5 years later than originally mentioned the first time, there was an open call for this kind of agency. So it was actually Europe-wide. Anyone who was interested could like try to get the contract to do the agency. And our company that was founded then won the competition. And since 2016, we're basically in operation. And what's really interesting is, so like everything we do, the service, doesn't matter who we deal with, we do it for free. The only source of income we have is the whole funding is coming from the city, which is, I think, unique in the city overall. I think we're the only project that is financed by 3 different departments of the city council, which are finance and economy, culture and science, and urban development. So it's quite an integrated approach. And it's also that 2 of the departments are like finance and economy, and culture and science are like in the hands of the Social Democrat Party. Urban development is in the hand of the Green Party. So it really is an integrated approach, which has benefits, but also, yeah, some downsides, because sometimes it's, yeah, hard to agree on something too. Sometimes processes take quite long. Who are we? Like the consortium that finally like won the competition and founded the company called Kreative Räume Wien, or we often like do the shortcut of KRW, or KRW in German. It consists of like 3 ideas in the background. One is like a law firm, basically. So it's in this field of expertise, it's quite important to be like to have knowledge about the whole like laws and structure behind, like as far as contracts and all this kind of stuff. That's really important. And it's also, if you would buy like this kind of expertise on a regular basis and have it outsourced, it would be quite expensive. So it's really great that we have that in our team. We have a lawyer who's part of the team, and whenever a question arises, he can give like his knowledge about it. Then the office KLK, it's an architecture office, so there's a big expertise on buildings. You can judge quite well like what to do with or what is realistic to do with the building, or how expensive it would be to activate something and this kind of stuff. And he has a lot of expertise about like urban development as well. And the third part, so in Otterkring, it's like a festival in Vienna that has gotten quite a bit of attention. And so Ulla Schneider, who's from Soho, she is like our ear on like the cultural side. So she has a lot of connections in Vienna to actors who do cultural activities, and like so that's like the three fields our background is comprised from: architecture, culture, and a lawyer firm, basically. What do we want? Like, as I mentioned before, we like, at least to us, we don't see like the main issue in Vienna, the question of vacancy. Our main goals is really to facilitate the access to affordable spaces, and mostly for cultural and social projects, art and creative industries, startups and this kind of stuff. Also to enable the development of hybrid areas where creative milieus strive. So we really see, like, especially in this kind of growing city, how like Vienna is, we still have some vacancy, and we see it as a chance to enable actors who have like a hard time to find spaces for their projects at a market value, because often, especially like even when it's some kind of economic activity, when it's still like in the startup phase, it can be really difficult to find a space you can afford to realize your idea. So that's mostly like the angle from which we tackle the subject. And so we see it as like a win-win-win situation, basically, for all sides. Of course, for the owners of some building, which can be private, but it can also be the city, or maybe some other public institution like ÖBB, which is like the Austrian Railway Association, or I don't know, any owner. Has quite a few benefits. It can be about like one idea, of course, is to save money. So even the building, when it's empty and just standing there, it usually does cost money. So you can save this kind of operational costs of buildings or spaces. And that's also true, for example, if there is like going to be some construction project. Often like the land lot and is bought, and then it's empty for a while during the planning phase before construction starts. And like during this phase, you can like make use of the spaces of the buildings that are on the plot. And also, if it's like empty for a longer time, there's always the danger of decay or degeneration, and you can kind of prevent that when the building is in use. So that makes sense for the owners. Then you also definitely have like a positive image impact on the place identity of the area, which can be really interesting, for example, when planning a new living area or whatever, that, yeah, you can already, like before it was maybe not a well-known area at all, or like no one knew anything about it, and then you start doing like cultural projects and this kind of stuff there, and gives like a positive impact on the place. Of course, you can like, maybe if you don't want to tear down the building or whatever, like you find like potential users or renters who might after a while be able to pay like a normal rent. Or also like maybe just find like a concept that makes sense for the place. Maybe something develops you didn't think about before, and yeah, that's kind of like the benefits for the owners. Then for the potential users, of course, like the main idea is to find a place that is suited for the project without being too expensive, or like should be affordable. And what's an interesting point here, or a concept I want to introduce, is what we call space entrepreneurs. It's quite common now that when it's like a bigger building that is empty, and that's like the one side, and it has, I don't know, 2,000 square meters. And on the other side, there's potential users, like often artists or this kind of startup firms and this kind of stuff. They would like to use the building, but of course the owner, doesn't matter if it's the city or a private one, has no interest whatsoever dealing with 20, 30 independent users. Like that would be, I don't know, like quite a hustle to do that. So what kind of develop is space entrepreneurs who take over a building, like they rent the building and then rent it out again to the individual users. So the kind of the city or the owner, whoever it is, has just to deal with like one group of people or one person that is in charge for the whole thing, and they kind of, as a job, facilitate the space. And that makes many projects possible that wouldn't be possible without. One downside definitely is that it's basically a full-time job often, at least if it's a bigger project. So like they often need to, or usually need to, charge the users some additional fee to be able to do their job, because they have to live of it. So it makes spaces a little bit more expensive, but it's still an important idea. And that's how many projects really work. And for urban society as a whole, yeah, this kind of projects often are like some of the most interesting spaces in the city and have potential for integration, because you have like social projects there, you have cultural things going on, exhibitions, whatever. And for the urban society as a whole, it's definitely beneficial, or more beneficial than just some empty buildings sitting there. Maybe in one of the biggest it's not a downside, but the fear always of the owners is that when you realize this kind of projects, that it will be a problem to maybe when there is a new use for the building to make the users leave, because they're always afraid of artists taking over a building for good and this kind of stuff. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit again. What do we really do to help this kind of the whole subject? So I would say actually the thing we do on a daily basis all the time, it's basically counseling. So we are in contact all the time, especially with space seekers, you could say, people who are looking for spaces, potential users for spaces. Like we get, and there's several ways they contact us. Like on our website, there's like this kind of form you can fill in. I'm looking for a space with this kind of conditions, and I have this kind of money per month and whatever. And like, so we get that all the time. We get like a few emails basically every day of people looking for spaces. And we give them like the first reply to their kind of ideas, whether it's realistic, or like to give them some overview of the situation by email, or also they call us, like we talk with them on the phone all the time. Or also once a week on Tuesdays, every day, there's like 5 hours when you can visit us at like our office, and people come and get like advice on how to move on with their search for a space for their project. And yeah, dealing with those space seekers, counseling with them, it's really our daily, or a big part of our daily business, really. Then at the same time, of course, we do counseling also for the other side of the equation, which is the owners of buildings. So sometimes we are contacted by landowners, and they ask, like, I have this kind of empty building or whatever, do you have ideas what to do with it? How could it work? So we kind of support them with, or what we can do is like a location study, kind of to I don't know, get a basic idea of what's going on in the area, and based on that, give like a possible frame of utilization, like what could maybe make sense, because we also have like yeah, kind of an overview what kind of project right now works quite well, what doesn't work so well. And then of course we give them some legal counseling also. So whenever a project starts, like that's not the first step, but when it becomes more concrete. So there is a building, there is a group of users. It's really important to help them with the legal framework, because there are several things you have to think about when setting up a contract. But I'm going to come back to that point anyways. Then the second thing is what we do is support. So on the one hand side, like support like the facilitation of projects. So to help a group of users who want to have a project idea we support them to make it happen, kind of. But also this is actually an ongoing issue. So when the project already exists, it stays important to be in touch. And like this kind of project, they contact us, say, oh, we've got this problem now, like what can we do to support projects that are in the making, kind of. And the third thing is communication. That means like building awareness for the subject in the city. and that is actually especially targeted toward the city administration, because although you might think everybody knows what's going on as far as vacancy use in Vienna, since it's even funded by the city, that's actually not true at all. The administration is huge, and like there are always, like all the time, parts of the city administration who don't realize that we, like maybe even that we exist. And so we try to always like make not just the city, also like other stakeholders aware of like the possibility, what you can do with this kind of empty spaces. And so we show potential uses, and also we present like activation options, so like to help the realization that this is a way to go that makes sense. And then the fourth point that actually is connected to everything else, of course, it's networking, basically. Like, so on the one hand side, it means to cooperate and to have a knowledge transfer between the different stakeholders, and like also to the relevant departments of the city, and to be in contact with interest groups like the economic chamber or the technical university, and like maybe also this kind of space entrepreneurs, and we've got several of those, like Nest or Paradox, or like also some projects like in Grätzl. I think Silvia's going to talk about it if I saw it like quickly on one slide. And so networking is really important. So we, like whenever people come with an idea or they have a problem and have a project running, we kind of try to have an idea, okay, this project is the right one for you to realize your idea. They have still some space, or okay, you've got this problem, maybe talk to that one of the city administration, they might help you. It's really important to bring kind of like the right actors together. So this here is actually a slide that kind of shows like the environment we work on. Basically, it's a little bit complex maybe to get into detail now. It's basically, and it's only targeted this one at dealing with private owners mostly. And like on the right hand side, you've got property owners. On the right lower side, you have the creative users. On the left lower side, you have the space entrepreneurs, and then the left upper side, real estate business. And there's really difference if you deal with real estate business or the real estate sector. We also like those, we contact them too and ask them, do we have some kind of empty building maybe we could try to find a use for. It's a little different than when you talk with like the property owners who are like more like small scale, because when we talk to creative users who are seeking space, who are looking for like a small scale, like a small shop or whatever, it's definitely a different kind of process, and you do the networking directly between them. While when you have this bigger kind of building that belongs to some real estate business or maybe also the city, you need this kind of space entrepreneur to be in between the creative users and the owner of the big place, basically. And one point I wanted to get to is the common legal frameworks. That's maybe quite important to understand. The goals, what we want to achieve with the kind of contract that is made between the users and the owners, is mostly a low cost. For the users, it's really important because people who want to do a project, but they have the funds to realize it via the normal market, they're not going to contact us. That's not the kind of people to come to us. To us, it's more people like from cultural projects, social projects, artists who have trouble to realize a project with rents at a market value. So they come to us. That's mostly the people we deal with. So low cost is key. Then what is also important idea is planning reliability. So sure, like if the cost is low, but you have no guarantee that you're still going to be using the building in 3 months because they kick you out, it's going to be really important, like really difficult to realize a project, because like how can you invest when you are not sure that, like invest time, invest money when you're not sure you're going to be able to stay. And then also an important part is the regulation of liabilities, who is in charge when the roof is leaking or whatever. And that's part of minimizing the risk for the ones who do the project, and to some degree also to the owner of the place, of course. And so the kind of contracts that are quite common is either like just a normal rent contract. That's definitely possible too. And maybe there's also like if the building is not going to be torn down, the end goal, if the project is running well, at some point we have like a normal rental contract. And the way to get there, which is quite, or can be a really good way, is actually a graduated rent. That means like in the beginning, the rent is low, but you agree from the beginning that like every 6 months or whatever, it goes up a couple of euros. And so you start low, but you agree already beforehand that it's going to increase to like a regular level rent. And especially for this kind of startup projects, it can be interesting because like in the beginning, I mean, they have few money, but finally it's still like a project that is geared towards generating money basically, and that's different from maybe some social projects that's going to stay precarious like for the indefinite future. So that's one way to do it. Then what we used to do a lot was actually this kind of precarious rental contract. That's a kind of contract where actually the users only pay the operational cost of the building, nothing more. But also they have no planning reliability basically, because with this kind of contract you can be always kicked out like from one day to the other basically. And that's the way a lot of projects were done in the beginning, but it was realized that this kind of contract has its problems because maybe a group of users does this kind of contract once, they get kicked out and they're not interested in doing this kind of project anymore because they spend time and resources, and in the end suddenly they had to move out. So what we aim for with this kind of users who are not so well equipped financially is often a lending agreement. So the operational costs are paid, but you have like a guaranteed time span in which they cannot kick out. We often aim for 3 years. That's like what we try to do. And maybe like if it's perfect, it's even like that actually they have a guaranteed time span of 3 years, but the users can leave the building with like a 3-month period to say in advance if the project is not working or whatever. Like it's important to minimize the risk because like if potential users are afraid to be broke by the project, they're going to be less likely to do it. That's like the general overview of what we do, kind of. And then I wanted to get to a few projects. That's a few projects in Vienna that were important recently, and to some degree, usually we were in like part of it. Not like it's not always the same. Like some projects we really kind of facilitate and start, and some we just have like a minor part to do with it. And there are definitely also projects in Vienna we don't have anything to do. And this is like of just this 10 projects that were on the list, kind of like a map where they are in Vienna. So you can see it's actually quite spread out around the city, and some are even quite central. One project that got like the most attention, or was like probably the most important project for us, it's Creative Cluster Margareten. And Margareten is a district of the city. It's a former school building that just, maybe you can see it here better, the building in the front, like this part was empty. And actually back here, that's also still a school and was still in use as a normal school. So it's also like you've got it with like floors. But here, part of the building was, at least for this school year, still in use for school. The other part was not. It's property of the Municipal Department of Schools in Vienna, of course, and it was empty. And now it's used as a creative and art incubator. So there are studios for performing arts, for visual art, for creative industries, culture, education, and so on. And it's managed by the Creative Cluster Kunstverein, which already had experience with other projects, and the users are mostly like artists, musicians, creative industries, and so on. And the building is given to the property management group, the space entrepreneur, with this kind of lending contract, as I mentioned. So they just pay like the operational costs, and on top they charge a little more to the end users, kind of. The role of us was legal counseling, networking, and a call for users. Here you can see in the middle, it's like the month. So the duration from like the first contact until the project like really started, that users moved in, it took 21 months. So you can see this kind of project, it's not working from one day to the other. It can take quite a while. So initially we contacted like the City Council on Education in the end of 2017 to ask is there maybe some kind of empty building that we could use for this kind of project, or that could be activated for this kind of project? Then it took a year till they came back to us and said, okay, now there's a school that you could maybe use. And then our role is to guide the process of how to find users. That's the main role, what we do. So we took a look at the building. We did an open call for users. 8 groups were interested. They came to look at the building and gave maybe their core idea of what they want to do. And then at the same time, like a parallel, we started to explain to the owners of the building, so this Department of Vienna Schools, what kind of contract would make sense to minimizing risks and enabling users to do a good project. This of course took a while until it was agreed what kind of contract would be possible. And then what's really important, when we do this kind of project, it's never us who choose who the user is going to be. We maybe give a recommendation. This is a project we believe in that could really work. We give a recommendation, but we never decide. It's always the owners of the building who decide who's going to get it. We can't do that. It's not up to us. So they re-invited 3 groups to present their project ideas. One of the 3, of course, was the one that finally got the building. And then, finally was handed over, and they took a couple of months to prepare the building, to do some adaptations, and finally in August 2019 they moved in, and now it's going to be in use for 3 years, and actually got really at least for 3 years. That's what guaranteed. Maybe it's going to be even longer. And before the whole project took start, they were thinking about either just tearing down the building and use it as a parking lot, or just leaving it empty. And maybe it's going to be a site for a new school in the future. It's not sure yet. But now it's really a hub for creative use in the district, and it's a great place. So I think was really beneficial to make this process happen. Another project that's a little different is the Dessous. This is actually a privately owned building. So it was a former manufacturing office building. And it's owned by Liv Immobilien, which is a real estate firm. And basically here it was the other way around. They contacted us. It was a private real estate business that contacted us. They have this building. It's empty. What can we do with it? And we did some legal counseling and helped to find users basically. And there it's not as much in the creative industries direction, in the creative cluster I explained before. It's really artists who have they have their studios there, and at the same time they do exhibitions and stuff. And they got the building really, really cheap, and we basically helped to find users for the building. The future outlook. So I guess you kind of got an idea what we're doing now. And still there are a few things ahead that might change. This contract we have from the city to do our job is not indefinite. It's always for 3 years. So it was prolonged once so far. We got it from 2016 to 2019 basically, and then from 2019 to 2022, February 2022. And until then, we're going to work in the constellation we do right now. But it's already clear, mostly clear at least, because it seems to be the common way to do things, that you just prolong the contract once, and then there's going to be a new open call. So 2022, for that, we kind of have to reapply. And of course, so far, our field of activity, our field of action has over the time kind of stayed the same, but there are a few things we would love to see to brought in, because maybe as you realized, our instruments, it's quite soft. It's mostly, we don't have a really hard tools to make things happen, and we would love to have a little bit more possibilities. One is have a fund, so some of money that we can either use to make rents for this kind of projects more affordable, or maybe also to give money for the starting phase of projects. And of course, we could probably not administrate that on our own, but together with maybe Wirtschaftsagentur, economic agency of the city who would give the money, maybe like to have this kind of fund we have oversight over and try to enable projects, because like still to make spaces affordable is not always easy and would definitely make sense. And then another thing is that maybe so far we're not allowed to. We could like also be space entrepreneurs ourselves. Maybe we have like a couple of buildings in the city that we manage ourselves. And because sometimes it's also difficult to find someone to take over a building, and we could like maybe do the start of some project and look for some space entrepreneur to take over in the long term. And also we would love to have like enhanced access to information, because there's not so many numbers, or like there's no good overview over the kind of empty buildings that are available in the city. And like our sources of inspiration right now, because like they kind of do what we ask for, are Hamburg, Copenhagen, and Zurich. That like they kind of realized what I just mentioned in their with their agencies who deal with the whole thing. So that's kind of the cities we look at right now for inspiration. So it was definitely in English a little bit longer than I expected. I hope it still could give you some insight in what we do, and could be an inspiration for your work as well, I hope. So thank you for listening.